David Ramos was 14 years old. He had always known how different his life was from the other students at Willowdale High School. The school stood tall in the middle of a quiet town, surrounded by neat lawns and expensive cars. Most of the students came from rich families: doctors, lawyers, business owners. They wore expensive shoes, carried the latest phones, and talked about vacations in Paris or summer camps in New York. David had none of that. He wore hand-me-down clothes, walked to school, and spent most of his free time helping his father. His father, Mr. Ramos, was the school's janitor. Every day, he arrived early to clean the halls and stayed late to mop up the mess after students had gone home. He was a quiet, hard-working man who never complained, no matter how tiring the job was. Some students made fun of him behind his back. Others simply ignored him. But David always saw his father as a hero. He knew how hard his father worked to keep their small apartment running and to pay the bills. And even though Mr. Ramos was often exhausted, he always had a kind word and a smile for David because of his father's job. David got to see the school in ways most students didn't. He came early and stayed late, sometimes sitting in empty classrooms while his father worked. He never caused trouble. He never asked for attention. He just did his work, kept his head down, and stayed invisible. But David had a secret. In the far corner of the school's auditorium stood an old black piano. It wasn't used often, so most of the time it just sat there covered in dust, waiting for the annual school concert or a drama performance. But David noticed it the first time he stepped inside the auditorium as a young boy, when he was just visiting his father during cleaning hours. There was something magical about that piano. It called to him in a way that words couldn't explain. When no one was watching, David would slowly walk toward it, lift the cover, and press the keys gently. At first, it was just random sounds. But over the years, something inside him began to grow. A memory, a feeling. His fingers started to move with purpose, guided by something deep in his heart. That something was his mother. David's mother had passed away when he was just 7. She had been a beautiful woman with a soft voice and warm eyes, and she had been a pianist. Before her illness, she used to play for David every evening. The two of them would sit together, his tiny hands on the keys. Hers guiding them, and music would fill their small living room. After she died, the house became quiet. But the memory of her music stayed alive in David's soul. He didn't have a piano at home, just an old second-hand keyboard that his father had bought with money saved from skipped meals and extra shifts. David practiced on it every night, teaching himself songs from books he borrowed from the library. He watched his YouTube videos quietly, wearing headphones so he wouldn't disturb his father. He never told anyone at school about this part of his life. It was his secret world, quiet, precious, and full of love. One day, everything changed. It was a cold Thursday afternoon. The sky outside was gray, and rain tapped against the windows. Lunch break had just started, and students filled the halls, laughing and shouting. David didn't have any friends to sit with, so he went to his favorite place, the auditorium. The room was empty, dark, and peaceful. He walked down the stairs and toward the stage. The old piano stood there waiting. He sat down and opened the lid carefully. His fingers touched the keys, and he began to play a soft, slow melody. It was a piece he had been practicing for months, something his mother used to play on rainy days. The music echoed in the empty room, soft and full of emotion. David closed his eyes and let the music take him away. He didn't know someone was watching. Principal Hargrove stood near the entrance of the auditorium. He had been passing by when he heard the sound. Curious, he stepped inside and saw David on the stage. A small smile played on his lips, not a kind smile, but one filled with mockery. Principal Hargrove was not a kind man. He came from a rich family himself and believed that people should know their place. He always treated students from wealthy families with special attention, and those from poorer backgrounds like David with cold politeness or plain ignorance. To him, the janitor's son sitting at the piano was a joke. As David finished the piece and stood up to leave, Hargrove stepped forward. "Well, well," he said, his voice loud in the empty room. "What do we have here?" David froze. He hadn't seen the principal walk in. His heart pounded in his chest. "I didn't know." "We had a musician among us," the principal said, walking slowly toward the stage. "Especially not the janitor's boy. David looked down. "I'm sorry, sir. You were just pretending to be a pianist." Hargrove's voice was dripping with sarcasm. "It's quite a hobby for someone like you." David didn't respond. He felt small under the man's stare. The principal looked thoughtful for a moment, then smiled again. "Tell you what. Tomorrow, during the lunch assembly, why don't you play something for the whole school? A little performance. I'm sure everyone would love it." David's mouth went dry. Was he serious? "But sir," he began. "But—" Hargrove held up a hand. "Consider it a special opportunity," he said. "We'll see what talent lies hidden in our humble janitor's family." Then he turned and walked away, leaving David standing alone on the stage. The next day came far too quickly. News of the performance spread through the school like wildfire. Students laughed and whispered in the halls. Some thought it was a joke. Others were curious. Most assumed David would be embarrassed in front of everyone. A few felt sorry for him, but no one tried to stop what was happening. David didn't sleep the night before. He sat on his bed, staring at the wall, thinking about his mother and the music they used to share. His father noticed his silence. "What's wrong?" Mr. Ramos asked gently. David hesitated, then told him everything: the piano, the principal, the performance. His father's face grew serious. "Do you want to do it?" "I don't know," David whispered. "I think he wants to humiliate me." Mr. Ramos was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Then don't do it for him. Do it for her. Do it for yourself. Show them who you are." At lunch the next day, the auditorium was full. The lights were on, the chairs were filled with noisy students, and the air buzzed with excitement. The teachers sat near the front, watching quietly. Principal Hargrove stood by the side of the stage, arms crossed, waiting. David walked slowly onto the stage. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him. His hands were shaking. His legs felt weak. He sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes. He remembered his mother's face, her smile, the warmth in her hands. And then he began to play. At first, the audience was noisy, but as the music flowed from his fingers, soft, clear, beautiful, something changed. The room grew quiet. The snickering stopped. Phones dropped. Eyes widened. David played with everything he had. The music was not just notes, it was memories, emotions, love, pain. It was his story. And for the first time in his life, everyone listened. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then someone clapped. Then another. And soon, the whole auditorium was filled with the sound of applause. David looked up, confused. He saw the shock on the faces of the students, the surprise in the eyes of the teachers. Even Principal Hargrove looked unsure of himself. David stood up, bowed slightly, and walked off the stage. He didn't say a word, but he didn't need to. Everyone had heard him speak through the music hand. They would never forget it. The sound of the last note hung in the air like magic. David's hands gently left the piano keys, and for a few seconds, the room was completely silent. The auditorium, packed with students and teachers, felt frozen in time. The boy, everyone, had laughed at the janitor's son, who was expected to mess up and embarrass himself, had just given one of the most beautiful piano performances anyone had ever heard. Then a slow clap came from somewhere in the back. At first it was just one person, then another joined in, then another. And suddenly, the whole room was clapping, cheering, whistling. People stood up. Phones were raised in the air to record. Mouths hung open in disbelief. David looked out at the crowd, his heart still beating fast. He had not expected this. He thought they would laugh. He thought they would mock him. He thought they might even boo. But instead, he had left them speechless. He stood up slowly and gave a small bow. The applause grew louder. Few students who had laughed at him the day before were now shouting his name. "David! David!" someone yelled. Another student jumped to his feet and shouted, "That was insane!" David walked off the stage without saying a word. He didn't need to. The music had spoken for him. He'd walk past Principal Hargrove, who was standing by the side of the stage, arms still crossed, but with a strange look on his face. It was not anger, but it was not pride either. It was confusion, maybe even embarrassment. The principal had expected David to fail, and now he didn't know what to do. David didn't stop to look at him. He kept walking and stepped into the hallway where it was quiet again. His hands were still trembling from the nerves and the excitement. His legs felt like jelly. He leaned against the wall, took a deep breath, and let out a long sigh. He had done it. He had played in front of the entire school, and somehow he had made them all listen. A few minutes later, the auditorium emptied. Students rushed out, still talking about what they had just seen. David tried to stay out of the way, keeping close to the wall, hoping to disappear, but it didn't work. "Hey, David," a voice called. He turned to see Maya, one of the smartest girls in school. She had never spoken to him before, not even once. Now she was smiling. "That was beautiful," she said. "Where did you learn to play like that?" David looked down, a little shy. "At home. My mom taught me, before she passed away." Maya's smile softened. Well, she must have been amazing. "You're incredible." David didn't know what to say. More students came up to him in the hallway. Some wanted to shake his hand. Others wanted to ask questions. A few even asked him if he could teach them. It was strange and overwhelming. Just yesterday, they had ignored him. Today, they couldn't stop talking to him. By the end of the day, David's name was on everyone's lips. In the cafeteria, students were still talking about the performance. Someone had uploaded a video online, and it was already being shared around the school's social media pages. The caption read, "Janitor's son stuns entire school with piano skills." That night when David got home, his father was already there. Mr. Ramos had heard about the performance before David even arrived. One of the teachers had told him, "You did it, son," Mr. Ramos said, his eyes watery with pride. "You played in front of all of them." David smiled and nodded. They actually clapped. Mr. Ramos pulled his son into a hug. "She would have been so proud of you." David knew who he meant. His mother. He thought of her every time he played. That night, he sat at the little keyboard in their living room and played the same piece again, this time just for her. The next morning, things were different at school. People smiled at him in the hallway. Few students even moved over to make room for him at lunch. It was strange, being noticed like this. David wasn't used to attention, and honestly, he didn't want it. He just wanted to play his music. During his last class of the day, a knock came at the door. The teacher went to answer it, and David heard her say, "Yes, of course. He's right here." The teacher turned and looked at him. "David, the principal would like to see you in his office." David felt his stomach tighten. What did he want now? He walked to the office slowly. When he stepped inside, Principal Hargrove was sitting behind his big wooden desk, flipping through a folder. He didn't look up at first. "Sit," he said. David sat down, nervous. The principal finally looked at him. "You surprised everyone yesterday?" David stayed quiet. Hargrove leaned back in his chair. "I didn't expect you to actually play well. I thought you were just fooling around." David didn't say anything. He didn't trust the principal. Something about the way he spoke made David feel uneasy. Hargrove continued, "You've got talent, I'll admit that. And now, people are watching. The school board saw the video. Few parents even emailed me. They think I discovered you." David blinked. "What?" The principal smiled. "It's not a bad look for the school, you know. Like a talented student. From a humble background, very inspirational." David realized what was happening. The principal was trying to take credit for what he had done. He was pretending that making David play had been part of some plan to help him. "I didn't do it for you," David said quietly. Hargrove raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? I played for my mom, for my dad, not because of you." The principal's face changed slightly, but he said nothing. "Am I done?" David asked. "Yes, you can go." David stood up and left the office without looking back. Outside, he found a teacher waiting, Mrs. Thompson, the music teacher. She was smiling. "I saw the video," she said. "You're gifted, David." He blushed. "Thank you. I'd like you to join the music club," she said. We have a school concert coming up in a few weeks. I think it's time people hear more of what you can do. David hesitated. I don't really do. Clubs. She smiled again. Then don't think of it as a club. Think of it as a chance to keep playing for your mom. For yourself. David nodded. He liked that idea. Over the next few days, David started to feel more comfortable. He spent his free time in the music room, where Mrs. Thompson helped him learn new pieces. She introduced him to composers he had never heard of before. Bach, Debussy, Rachmaninoff. Each one had a new story to tell. David learned to speak through their music. Students would sometimes stand outside the music room just to listen. Some even came in to sit and watch him play. Slowly, the quiet boy who used to sit alone at lunch was becoming someone everyone admired. But David didn't let it go to his head. He still helped his father clean up after school. He still walked home. He still played on his old keyboard at night. Fame didn't change him. It only gave him more reason to keep going. Then something unexpected happened. One evening, while he was practicing in the music room, a woman came in with Mrs. Thompson. She was tall, wore a long coat, and had a warm, serious face. This is Miss Levine, Mrs. Thompson said. She's from the Riverdale Music Academy. David stood up, unsure what to say. I saw your performance video, Ms. Levine said. You have raw talent. You play with emotion. Not many students your age do that. David looked down, a little shy. I'd like to invite you to audition for our academy, she said. We offer scholarships to gifted students. David's heart skipped a beat. A real music school? Him. But I'm just me, he said. Quietly, miss, Levine smiled. That's exactly why I want you. She handed him a card and left. David stood there speechless. That night, when he told his father, Mr. Ramos sat down and buried his face in his hands. He didn't cry, but David saw his shoulders shaking. You deserve this, his father whispered. So proud. David hugged him tightly. A door had just opened, one he never thought he'd reach, and it had all started with a song, broken piano, and a moment that was never meant to lift him up, but did. The week after Ms. Levine's visit was like a dream for David. Every day felt a little more exciting than the last. Something deep inside him had changed. For the first time in his life, he felt seen, not just as the janitor's son or the quiet boy who sat alone, but as someone special. David walked down the halls, and people smiled at him, nodded at him, even said hello. Teachers who had never spoken to him before asked how he was doing. Students asked him about the piano, about the music he played, even what his favorite song was. It felt strange, but in a good way. He didn't feel invisible anymore, but even with all the attention, David stayed humble. He didn't show off. He didn't act like he was better than anyone. He still helped his dad mop the floors after school, still carried his worn-out backpack and ate the same simple lunch. That part of him never changed. One day after school, he sat with his father in their small living room. The keyboard was in the corner, and the TV was turned off. Dad, David said softly, do you think I should do the audition? Mr. Ramos looked up from the newspaper. Do you want to? David thought about it. I do, but I'm scared. His father smiled gently. You've already done something much harder. Played in front of your whole school when you thought they'd laugh at you. This is just the next step. David nodded. It's a really good school, Riverdale Academy. They have real pianos, real teachers. You deserve real chances, his father said. I want to make you proud. You already have. The next day, David told Mrs. Thompson that he wanted to audition. She smiled so wide her eyes sparkled. That's wonderful, David, she said. We'll get you ready. I'll help you choose the perfect pieces. David practiced every day after school in the music room. Stayed late, sometimes even after the sun had gone down. Mrs. Thompson helped him with technique, timing, and confidence. He picked two pieces, one that reminded him of his mother, soft and emotional, and another that was more difficult and dramatic. To show his skill, the days passed quickly. Each afternoon, he got a little better. His hands moved faster. His expression deepened. The music came alive under his fingers, and every time he played, he imagined his mother sitting next to him, smiling. Meanwhile, Principal Hargrove watched from a distance. He didn't say much, but he saw the changes. Students were talking about David more and more. Teachers praised him. Parents sent emails thanking the school for supporting such raw talent. But deep inside, Hargrove felt a mix of emotions, confusion, pride, and something else. Maybe even jealousy. He had never intended to help David. In fact, he had set him up to fail. But now, David's success was making the school look good. And in a strange way, it made the principal look good too. He didn't like that the boy had done it all on his own. Looking like the villain, the day of the audition arrived. David wore his best shirt, one his father had ironed carefully the night before, and dark pants, packed a sandwich and a bottle of water, and carried his music sheets in a folder. So they left early. Mr. Ramos took the day off from work just to go with him. They took the bus and sat together in silence. David looked out the window, his heart racing. "You nervous?" his dad asked. David nodded. "Very, that's good. It means it matters to you." The academy was even more beautiful than David had imagined. The building was old, but elegant, with tall glass windows and wide stone steps. Inside, the floors were polished. The air smelled like books and wood polish, and everything felt calm and serious. David and his father waited in a small room with other students. Some wore suits. They looked confident, like they belonged here. David felt out of place. A boy nearby was talking to his mother. "My private tutor says I'm ready," he said loudly. "I've been practicing 6 hours a day." David looked down at his folder, feeling small. He didn't have a tutor, just an old keyboard and memories of his mother's hands on the piano. Finally, a woman came out and called. "His name? David Ramos?" He stood up, took a deep breath, and followed her. The audition room was large and quiet. A black grand piano stood at the center. 3 judges sat behind a long table watching him. Ms. Levine was one of them. She gave him a kind nod. David bowed slightly, walked to the piano, and sat down. His fingers hovered above the keys. He closed his eyes for a moment, then began to play. The first piece was soft and full of emotion. The room felt warm as the notes floated through the air. It was a song his mother used to hum while cooking dinner. He played it slowly, each note like a whisper from the past. When he finished, there was no sound in the room, just the ticking of a wall clock. Then he started the second piece. This one was harder, with fast runs and tricky changes. His fingers flew over the keys, and he played with energy and heart. It was bold. It was powerful. It was fearless. When he hit the final note, he held it just a second longer, then lifted his hands. Silence. Then one of the judges leaned forward. "Thank you, David." He bowed again and walked out of the room, his heart pounding. His father was waiting outside. "How did it go?" Mr. Ramos asked. "I don't know," David said honestly. "I gave it everything I had. It's all you can do," his father replied. They went home together, tired but proud. David didn't know what the result would be. Maybe he would get in, maybe not, but he had played his heart out, so that was what mattered. The next week was long. Each day felt like a month. David tried to stay calm, but the waiting was hard. Mrs. Thompson kept him busy with practice. At lunch, students still came up to talk to him. And at night, he played on the keyboard, hoping, dreaming. Then on a rainy Thursday evening, the letter arrived. Mr. Ramos came home holding a white envelope. "It's from the academy," he said quietly. David took it with shaking hands. He sat down, opened it carefully, and pulled out the letter. His eyes moved quickly across the page. Then they stopped. He looked up at his father, his mouth slightly. Mr. Ramos sat down, completely speechless. David read the letter again. "They said they've never seen someone with my emotion and connection to music. They want me to start next semester." Father and son hugged tightly. It was a moment they would remember forever. David lay awake that night, thinking about everything. About his mother, about the piano in the school auditorium, about the principal who had tried to mock him, and about how something meant to embarrass him had become the beginning of everything. But something else happened the next day, something he didn't expect at school. When he walked into the building, Principal Hargrove was waiting for him. Near the entrance, he was dressed neatly, holding a paper in his hand. "David," he said, "a moment, please." David stopped. "Yes, sir. I heard the news," Hargrove said. "Congratulations." "Thank you," David said politely. "I hope you remember where it all started," the principal continued. "This school gave you a stage." David looked at him for a long moment. "No, sir," he said slowly. "It started with my mom. Then, it grew because of my dad. I found my voice when no one was looking. The stage didn't make me. I was already playing long before anyone noticed." The principal's face froze for a second. David smiled gently. "But thank you for letting me play." He walked away, leaving the principal standing alone. That weekend, the school announced David's scholarship in the weekly newsletter. Everyone clapped. Even parents came up to Mr. Ramos to shake his hand. One mother said, "Your son is going to make history." David didn't care about fame. All he wanted was to play music, to tell stories through the keys, and to make people feel something real. And so with a full heart, he began to prepare for a new chapter. Riverdale Academy was waiting, and with every note he played, David remembered where he came from, not a place of wealth or status, but a place of love, hard work, and music. David's life changed more than he had imagined. After getting accepted into the Riverdale Music Academy, his days started to feel very different. He no longer walked down the same halls of his old school. No more mopping with his dad after hours. No more late afternoons in Mrs. Thompson's music room. Everything he had known for years felt far away, like a dream he was waking up from. Riverdale Academy was huge. The building was beautiful, with tall columns and glass windows. Inside, it smelled like books and polished wood. Students here wore tidy uniforms and carried fancy music cases. Some of them had been playing music since they were 5 years old. Their parents were musicians, professors, or rich business people. And here was David, just a quiet boy with second-hand clothes, carrying a simple folder and a heart full of music. On his first day, walked into the piano room where a group of students had gathered. They talked loudly, laughing and joking, their fingers dancing on the keys for fun. David stood near the wall watching them. He didn't know anyone. No one looked at him twice. A tall boy with shiny black shoes played a quick piece and turned to the others. "Easy stuff," I learned. "This when I was 6, he said. Someone noticed David. "Hey, are you new?" David nodded. "Yeah, I'm David." Tall boy raised an eyebrow. "Where'd you play before? Some conservatory? Private teacher?" David swallowed. "Just ... my school. And my mom used to play." The room went quiet for a second. One girl tilted her head. "Wait, are you the scholarship kid?" David nodded again. Another boy whistled softly. "Wow, you must be really good if they let you in for free." David didn't know what to say, so he just gave a small smile that night. After all his classes, David went to the practice room. He sat down at one of the school's grand pianos and placed his fingers gently on the keys. The room was quiet. The walls were thick, built to keep out noise. He closed his eyes and began to play. He played slowly at first, his heart guiding him. Then the notes grew stronger, the music more alive. He played like he always had, without fear, without trying to impress anyone. Just feeling each sound. When he finished, he sat in silence. He felt better, but as he stood to leave, he heard a knock. He turned. A teacher had been watching through the glass window. "That was beautiful," she said, walking in. "What was that piece?" David looked down. "I made it up." She blinked. "You composed it?" He nodded shyly. She smiled. "You've got something special. Keep going." From that moment, David made it his goal to grow. Every day after class, he practiced. He listened to recordings, watched other pianists, asked teachers questions, and wrote down little pieces of music in a notebook. He wanted to learn everything, not because he wanted to win or show off, but because it made him feel alive. Still, not everything was easy. Some students treated him differently. They didn't say rude things, but they acted like he didn't belong. When he walked into the lunchroom, they sat in tight circles. When he spoke in class, a few rolled their eyes. The tall boy from the first day, whose name was Preston, made snide comments sometimes. "Careful, guys," he once said. "David might clean the piano after we're done." David heard it. He felt it sting, but he didn't answer. He remembered what his dad always said. "Don't let people pull you down, just rise higher." So David kept working. One day their music theory teacher announced a contest. Each student had to compose an original piece and perform it live in front of the school and parents. The best performance would get a solo spot in the upcoming winter concert. David's heart raced. This was it, a chance to prove himself. But it also scared him. What if he messed up? What if the other students laughed again, like they almost did at his old school? That night, he talked to his dad over dinner. "They're doing this performance thing," David said. "We have to play something we write ourselves." His dad smiled. "Sounds like a perfect chance." "I don't know. Everyone there is so trained. Some of them have been writing music since they were kids." His dad put his spoon down. "And you've been writing music in your heart since before you could even talk. That's worth more than all the lessons in the world." David nodded slowly. "You think I should do it?" "I think you should make them feel something they'll never forget." The next few weeks were full of music. David wrote every day, sitting by the window or in the library. Tried different melodies, different moods. He remembered how his mom's lullabies used to sound. He thought of how the city felt on a rainy day, how his dad hummed when cleaning, how the silence after a hard moment could feel louder than a storm. He put it all into his music. Slowly, a piece began to form. It was soft at first, then it grew, then it softened again. It was full of feeling, joy, sadness, hope, and strength. It told his story, without needing words. The night before the performance, David couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his fingers twitching as if they were already on the piano. He heard every note in his mind, over and over. The next morning, he arrived early. The auditorium was huge. The lights, the stage, the rows of seats, all made his stomach twist. Students were warming up, tuning instruments, checking their sheet music. Preston walked by and gave David a smirk. "Hope you don't freeze up out there." David didn't answer. He waited backstage as other students played. One performed a fast, fancy piece. Another did a jazzy number that made the crowd clap along. Then it was his turn. He walked out slowly. Lights felt hot on his face. The room looked endless. Students, teachers, parents. In the front row, he saw his dad wearing his best shirt, smiling proudly. David sat down, took a deep breath, and placed his hands on the keys. Then he began to play. The first notes were quiet, like a whisper. Then they grew warmer, stronger. He poured his soul into the piano, telling a story of where he had come from. The halls he used to clean, the sadness he had hidden, the love he felt for his father, the memory of his mother's songs. The room was silent, every person frozen, listening. Then came the final part. The music rose, lifted high with emotion, and gently faded into peace. He held the last note just a moment longer, then let it go. Silence. Then ... applause. It started slow, then grew louder. People stood. Even some of the students clapped with real respect. David stood, bowed, and walked off stage. Backstage, the teacher, who had watched him before, was wiping tears from her eyes. That, she said softly, was something else. Later that day, they announced the winner. David's name was called. He would perform at the winter concert as the special soloist. Preston didn't say anything. He just walked past David, quiet. In the days that followed, something changed. Students started talking to David more. Some asked how he wrote his music. One girl asked if he could help her with a song she was working on. Even Preston nodded at him once in the hallway. But more than that, David felt different inside. He wasn't scared anymore. He belonged not because he had a scholarship, or because people clapped, but because he knew who he was now. The winter concert came. The hall was packed. Parents, teachers, students, and guests filled the seats. David sat backstage, dressed neatly, holding his sheet music. Right before he went on, someone tapped his shoulder. It was Ms. Levine. She smiled at him. "You've come a long way." He nodded. "Thanks to people who believed in me." "Did the hard part," she said. "Now go remind them why you're here." He walked out into the light once more. The piano stood waiting. He sat down, closed his eyes, and began to play. And this time the world listened not to a janitor's son or a scholarship kid, but to a musician whose story was made of courage, pain, and beauty. The winter concert had ended, but the sound of David's music stayed in the hearts of everyone who heard it. For many days, people at the academy talked about him. His name was whispered in the hallways, not with laughter or pity, but with respect. Even teachers who had never spoken to him before began to greet him kindly. Some called him the boy with golden fingers. But for David, all the praise didn't matter as much as one thing: he had played with his heart, and people had felt it. After the concert, his father was waiting for him backstage. His eyes were a little watery, but his smile was wide. "You did it," he said softly. David hugged him tightly. "I played for you and Mom." His father nodded. She would have been so proud. I know she was watching. That moment meant more to David than any trophy, applause, or award. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel small or invisible. He felt seen. As the weeks passed, things changed quickly. A famous piano teacher from another country had attended the winter concert. She had been visiting the school as a guest. After hearing David's performance, she contacted the school director and asked to speak with David privately. He was nervous as he walked into her office. She was sitting by a grand piano, wearing a long scarf and round glasses. "Hello, David," she said in a soft accent. "Please sit." He sat down, hands shaking a little. "I was moved by your performance," she said. "Where'd you learn to play like that?" David looked down. "My mom taught me when I was little. After she passed, I just ... kept playing." "You play with something many trained musicians don't have," she said. "You play with feeling. Deep, real feeling. That's rare." David smiled, unsure what to say. "I want to offer you a scholarship to study with me this summer," she said. "It's in Vienna. There will be students from all over the world. But I believe you belong there." David's mouth dropped open. "Vienna, really? Yes, but it won't be easy. It will require practice, dedication, and travel. Do you think you're ready?" David nodded slowly. "I'll do whatever it takes." That night he told his father. His dad sat quiet for a long time, processing the news. "Vienna," he whispered. "That's across the world." "I know," David said. "But it's a big opportunity." His dad finally smiled. "If your mother were here, she'd tell you to fly." And so began the next chapter of David's life. With the school's help, travel plans were made. Sponsors donated funds to cover flights, clothes, and supplies. David was going to Austria, the land of Mozart, Beethoven, and so many other great musicians. When the plane finally landed in Vienna, David stepped out into a world that looked like a storybook. Old buildings, wide streets, musicians playing violins in the park. It felt magical. The music academy where the summer program was held was even more beautiful than Riverdale. Marble floors, golden lights, and rooms filled with the sounds of different instruments. At first, David felt nervous again. The other students spoke different languages. Some had famous last names. They came from cities like Paris, Tokyo, Berlin. He felt like the only one who didn't belong. But then he sat at the piano, and everything changed. When he played his first piece, the room fell silent. No one laughed. No one looked bored. Even the strictest teachers leaned in. One girl from Italy came up to him after class. "That was amazing," she said. David smiled. "Thank you." Every day he learned something new. About technique, about music history, about styles he had never played before. But he also learned about himself. He learned that it didn't matter where you came from. What mattered was what you gave to the music and how honest you were about your emotions. During those weeks in Vienna, David wrote new pieces. His teachers were impressed. One even told him, "You're not just a pianist. a composer, a storyteller. Those words stayed with David. When summer ended, David returned home. At the airport, his father hugged him tightly. "You look different," his dad said. "Taller somehow." David laughed. "I feel different. Back at school, things were even better." He was no longer the janitor's son or the scholarship kid. He was simply David, the boy who had gone to Vienna, who could play the piano like the notes were alive. The principal who once mocked him stayed quiet now. One day, she even passed David in the hallway and nodded slightly. It wasn't an apology, but it was something Miss Levine, his old music teacher, invited him back to his previous school to play a piece for the younger students. When he arrived, the kids stared at him like he was a star. "You used to go here?" one boy asked. David smiled. "I used to mop the floors too." He sat at the same old piano where it all began. His fingers touched the keys, and the music flowed. After the performance, Ms. Levine hugged him. "I always knew you were meant for more." As the year went on, David started entering more competitions. Sometimes he won, sometimes he didn't. But he never let it change who he was. He always remembered why he played: for the love of music, for the memory of his mother, for the quiet strength of his father. One day, a big national music show sent an invitation. They'd seen a video of David playing online. It had gone viral. People from all over the world commented on how his music made them cry, gave them hope, or reminded them of someone they loved. The invitation said, "We would like you to perform as a featured guest on our live show. Millions of viewers will be watching." David's hand shook when he read it. "Millions," he whispered. His father looked at him. "You've already played for the world in your heart. Now it's just the world's turn to hear it." The night of the show arrived. David wore a simple black suit. Backstage, there were cameras, lights, people talking into headsets. Other performers practiced their songs and speeches. But David stayed calm. He sat quietly, thinking about everything that had brought him here, from cleaning floors to standing on the biggest stage of his life. When it was his turn, he walked out slowly. The lights were blinding. The stage felt huge. He sat at the piano. The host introduced him. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Michaels." Just a year ago, he was unknown. Today, he's one of the most talked about young pianists in the country. And he's going to perform something special, his own original composition. David closed his eyes. He thought of his mom's smile, his dad's quiet strength, Ms. Levine's belief, and that moment in the school auditorium when he first made everyone stop and listen. Then he began to play. The music started low, like a whisper of wind. Then it rose, gentle but strong, like a story being told. It spoke of sadness, of being small and invisible, of pain. Then came the light, the sound of hope, of courage, of rising above it all. Every note told a part of his journey. And when the final chord echoed through the hall, the world was silent. Then, like a wave, the applause came. People stood. Some had tears in their eyes. The host walked on stage. That, he said, was not just music. That was soul. After the show, people started recognizing David in the streets. News articles were written. Offers from music labels came. Universities asked him to speak. But David remained humble. He always said the same thing in interviews: "I just wanted people to feel something. That's what music is for." One day, his father showed him an old, dusty piano book. "This belonged to your mom," he said. "She never finished it. Maybe you can." David flipped through the pages. There were half-written songs, little notes, doodles in the corners. He smiled. "I will." And so, David began his next chapter, not just as a performer, but as a composer. He wrote music inspired by real life. One piece was called Janitor's Song. Another, Echoes of Her Hands, performed in different countries. In each place, he met people who shared their stories. Some were janitors, some were teachers, some were kids with dreams. He always listened, and he always played something just for them. Years later, David returned to his old school again, this time, not as a student, not even as a guest, but as a donor. He started a music fund for kids who couldn't afford lessons. He named it after his mother, the Clara Michaels Music Fund. The plaque read "Dot" at the ceremony. He spoke into the microphone. "Once upon a time, someone made me play piano to mock me," he said. "But that moment changed my life, because I realized something. They were laughing, but I wasn't afraid. I played anyway. And that choice to keep playing is why I'm standing here today." The crowd applauded. David looked out at the students sitting in the same seats he once sat in, and he smiled, because he knew now more than ever that music wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about money or status. It was about honesty, feeling, and the courage to keep going. It's even when the world tries to laugh at you and somewhere far away. In a quiet place beyond the stars, a mother listened and smiled too.